The message today is spontaneous insight. That's the topic. And for many of us, we might believe that spirituality or a spiritual journey is a journey or a process. And on one level it is, and yet on another level of awareness, it can be a spontaneous insight, a spontaneous recognition of a greater reality. So we are living in remarkable times. I don't think there's anyone alive today that can't say, okay, that seems true. We are living in extraordinary times. Now, we could say that at any moment, which is true. What is being called of us in this moment is to have a spontaneous insight. What does that mean? What is an insight? An insight to me in this moment, what is coming through is that we unplug from our outside. In other words, we unplug from what we're seeing in the world, what we're hearing in the world, maybe even our opinions of the world, and we tap into a greater reality and we view the world through this greater reality, which is reconnecting, which we've never disconnected from because the presence is never an absence, but my mind may believe a story that is not reality. And many of us have been taught to believe in the illusion of separateness, the illusion of not enoughness, the illusion of fear. And what we're being called to become aware of in this moment is that the greater reality exists within us right here and right now. And so if it's true, what we know to be true in New Thought, that there is one power and one presence, and that each of us is a perfect expression of that power, then we are called at this moment to recognize that and to practice that and to be that in the world. And so I'm going to be bold this morning. I hope that's okay with everyone. We are living in a time where a lot of opinions are being passed around and a lot of judgments are being passed around and a lot of division is being put on social media every single moment. We can take out our phone right now, these highly intelligent, super smartphones, and we can tap into any story that we want to, including a story of division and fear, of separateness, of not good enoughness, right and wrong, and good and bad. And then those of us who are in New Thought have an opportunity to bring a different message in the midst of that. Possibly the most profound teaching of all time came from Jesus the Christ, when he was said to have said that we are to be in this world, but not of this world. Be in this world and not of this world. And so if it's true that we are all one, then it is true that we are all one. So rather than looking at how we are different, can we recognize that in the midst of everything happening in the world, there is one power and one presence, and that we are that power. And because we have the ability to choose where we put our focus, we can radiate that oneness, that love, that truth into the world, into absolutely any situation. But the reason I say I'm going to be a little bold today is this. I see a lot of my fellow New Thoughters right now on social media simultaneously talking about oneness and also opinionating about how groups of people are wrong. And I want to acknowledge for a moment the ego and the mind. And as the reading says, how powerful the mind is. And if you're anything like me, you came into spiritual practice, I came into spiritual practice, and I thought the intention was to learn how to control my mind. Now, that has been a very, very interesting journey for me. And there has been some success, actually. I have learned how to focus on a different narrative than the one that was keeping me feeling stuck. I have learned how to become aware of the mind and ask myself, what would it be like for me to have a new narrative, a new story, a new idea about this? And I've had profound insights in how the mind can actually control my reality if I'm not even aware of it. But then there was this place in my journey where I began to understand that there's a greater reality that's beyond the mind. because the mind does what it does. And one of the things it does is sort and separate and look for what is safe and unsafe and what is good and what is bad. And so trying to change the mind can be a very, very interesting journey. Spontaneous insight offers a different possibility, and that is profoundly simple. I have a mind, but I am not my mind. I have thoughts, but I am not my thoughts. And why is that important? It's important because when I believe I am my thoughts, then I start comparing my thoughts to the people around me. And if you're anything like me, you probably think that your thoughts are the right ones, right? So I don't think anyone wakes up and thinks, I'm wrong and all of you are right, and I'm going to prove to you how I'm wrong. We are tapping into a greater awareness of reality, recognizing that we're all cells in one organism. And so let's use this as a metaphor for a moment. The cells in our body work together to produce this miracle of life. And when the cells begin to attack each other, we call that cancer. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I think I did pretty well with that. Very simplistic definition. So it's really about these cells attacking each other that create the dis-ease. And so if it is true that there is one power and one presence, and that each of us is an expression of that presence, then we are literally, not just theoretically, but literally all cells in a greater organism, one life. I think maybe they'll look back at us 100 years from now, 200 years from now, and say, they were really starting to understand it. They were pointing to it. They were pointing to that we literally are all one. And so if that's true, if it's true that we're all cells in one organism, when I fight another cell, what gets created? A cancer in our culture, in our society, in our humanity that pits us against each other, that points fingers, that has a judgment of whether you wear a mask or not, whether you stay home or not, whether you choose to get a vaccine or not, and the list goes on and on and on. And the thing that's interesting about it is the mind, maybe your mind just did it. My mind will say, but wait a minute. There is a right and a wrong in this. There is a right and a wrong. And on one level of reality, absolutely. But the issue with that is there's another person standing right over there that has a different point of view. And did you hear my language? There is another person. Do you hear how my mind wants to believe there is another person? Many wise people so many people are attributed to this, but people have said, how do I forgive? And the master said, the question is, how do I forgive others? And the master says, there are no others. And so if it's true that there's not another person, there's another cell in this one organism, and I believe that there's something wrong with that cell, what gets created? See, because it becomes profoundly simple. What do I want to be part of creating on planet Earth right now? Who have I come here to be? You could be asking questions like, why was I born into this time and space? Why did I choose this family? Why did I come here? I remember being a little kid, a very little kid, maybe 7 years old, and I remember the first time I was taught about heaven and hell, and it kind of made sense to me, right? Because I heard, if you're bad, you go to hell. If you're good, you go to heaven. And then I heard about reincarnation, and I thought, well, that's interesting too. Yeah, I could see that. And something came through that was so clear to me, and that is that heaven and hell is actually a way of being, and that we were on this planet Earth and we were a pretty low-level planet. Now, I don't want to say that from a place of judgment. So let me explain what I mean. When I was a little kid, I was so deeply in touch with the love that I am. I was so happy and so filled with joy. And I remember hearing the tall people use language that was racist or sexist. I remember feeling anger from people. I remember turning on the TV and seeing war, hunger. And just, I didn't understand how we could allow all of this to happen. And so it occurred to me as a little kid, whether it's true or not, it occurred to me that maybe we have chosen to come to Earth to try to change that, to try to be part of changing that, to use what's happening on planet Earth as fuel for our transformation. Now, I don't think when I was 7, I said, oh, I think I've chosen to be here because I'm choosing fuel for my transformation. But I did have this idea that there was a reason. And I didn't really understand what that reason was. And so around that same age, I closed my heart. I put a wall up because the world felt too scary. And I walked around with these core fundamental ideas and belief about myself and the world that I didn't understand yet was creating what I called reality. I came into spiritual practice when I was in my early 20s, walked into my first New Thought Center, and I remember feeling, wow, there's something here that's really powerful. There's something here that's a powerful message about thoughts creating reality. There's something powerful happening here that I have a choice in what I focus on, that I can actually change my thinking and change my life. All of this was profound to me. And then I recognized it at a deep level that what I was calling reality was really the projector that I was holding. And I was literally projecting my movie onto a blank canvas. Now, this took me many years to understand this, but there was a place where I came to when I recognized that it wasn't really about thought. And that's really what I want to focus on today. Is it true that thoughts create reality? Yes, it's true. And is there an even deeper understanding of that principle? Because if it's only thoughts that create reality, then I just change my thinking and I'll change reality and everyone's happy, right? That's what we have been working on for so many years with the law of attraction. I'm going to change my thoughts and then I'm going to attract what I want to create. I'm going to hold that picture and I'm going to manifest that. I'm going to attract that into my life. And at some point, I had an awareness that creating reality is really about vibration and frequency. That it's really not just the thoughts that I'm having, but it's the frequency that I am holding. And the true frequency, ultimate frequency, is that place that we could call God essence, source energy, infinite beingness. And when I tap into that, I have a completely different awareness of what I once called reality. And I recognize that it's not the law of attraction, it's the law of radiance. And when I understand that, not just as a thought, but as a practice, as a way of being, that I am literally a particle of source energy. Each of us is a perfect expression, a perfect emanation of that one power. And when I really understand that, my entire life changed in the blink of an eye. There was a spontaneous insight, and that insight is profoundly simple. I'm not my past. I'm not my thoughts about the past. I'm not about the conditions of the world, but I'm also not about rejecting any of that. See, that's the key for me, because I think sometimes it's really easy for us in New Thought to say, well, here's a perfect example. I remember a friend of mine in New Thought once said, I don't believe germs are real. Okay. I think a different awareness might be, they have no power over me, because who and what I know myself to be as infinite beingness, as source energy. Because if we're living in thought, it's so easy to do what we call metaphysical malpractice. What did I do to create this? What's wrong in my consciousness that I keep attracting unavailable people into my life? But when we shift to, in the midst of absolutely anything happening in the world, I can be love and light. And think, going back to the analogy of the human being and the cells, when we are in harmony, when the cells are in harmony, there is spontaneous healing, because healing is reality. That's what the body always wants to heal. Life always wants to happen. And so if that's true, then we're being called in this time on planet Earth to move beyond the fear and the division and the judgment and the finger pointing. I've seen some absolutely incredible memes lately. Absolutely incredible memes. I saw one today that had a series of headstones, people in their grave, and they had all these different phrases they were saying. Wow, we're living in some interesting times, aren't we? And what I know to be true is, we used to say, or we might say, everything is love or fear. And now we're moving into everything is love or a request for love. At the deepest level, what I know to be true is that we all want love and connection. And at the even deeper level, it's who and what we already are. And so as we understand in a new way that we are not here to get anything from the world, and maybe we're not even here to give anything to the world, but we're here to be the frequency of love in the midst of what's happening on planet Earth. We hear news about what's happening in Afghanistan. We hear news about what's happening in Louisiana. We hear news about what's happening with a virus or a vaccine. And it's really easy to be seduced by the division and the fear. And so one question I ask myself is, what is the request for love in the midst of this? And this request might not be conscious. So I'm going to share a little bit of my own story or an example of this. When I was early in spiritual practice, I was trying to use affirmations and the power of positive thinking and vision boards. And all of that was really useful, but I hadn't yet addressed the underlying deeper unconscious beliefs and ideas that I had about myself, the unconscious biases and beliefs about the world. And so I kept finding myself in relationships that were unfulfilling. And I kept pointing to the other people, work situations, friendships. There's something wrong here. And I really understood that it was really my own belief in my own unworthiness that was causing me to be attracted to relationships to confirm that core false belief. There was both freedom and pain, because there is something, when we say ignorance is bliss, there is something, I think, comforting in thinking that it's the world's fault. There is something comforting there. But the fundamental issue is, it's not bringing me what I truly desire. What do I truly desire? Love and connection. Who have I come here to be? Not what have I come here to get? And so in that same way, I would find myself being into relationships that were unfulfilling because of the core frequency or the core vibration, my own unworthiness. I was literally not only attracting it and being attracted to it, it was literally the only possibility, because like attracts like. And there was a period of time when I judged myself for that. And then there was a profound freedom that came in the midst of it, because I heard a New Thought speaker once say, if you don't believe the law works, look at your life and look at how it's connected with what you believe about yourself. Oh, something shot through me to a very deep core truth. And that was that the true spiritual practice is recognizing that I can unearth all of that and I can tap into a deeper frequency. Yes, I had been creating my life based on a core false belief in my own unworthiness. And if I created it in that way, I also have the power to uncreate it. And what was my request for love in that? Yes, I was in a lot of fear. I was creating all sorts of circumstances in my life that was creating more suffering and pain. And then when I understood that I could move beyond that story, I didn't need to change the narrative. I could just recognize that this thought in this moment is one among thousands of others, and I get to choose where I put my focus. I don't have to change the narrative. I can simply recognize it as a collection of thoughts, ideas, and beliefs that are creating what I call reality. And then there's freedom. Wow. I don't have to buy into the narrative. I can begin to ask myself, what is the request for love here? even with a friend or a family member who's posting something that my opinion comes up against with their opinion. My belief has a different perspective than my loved ones. I mean, I'm hoping that people I'm connected with on social media, I love in some way. So who have I come here to be? And what I want to close with is this, because all of this can sound really wonderful and maybe a little esoteric, but what's the practical piece of it? The practical piece of it is when I'm at war, I'm at war. And we simply create more of the same. When I believe I'm right and you're wrong, we're creating more division. And so the spiritual path, the spiritual opportunity is actually one that takes a great deal of courage. Because for me, it's courageous to live beyond my stories. It's courageous to ask myself, what is this person? What is the request for love here? It's courageous for me to sit with the reactive impulse and to feel it in my body rather than react to it. It is courageous for me to have conversations with people who view the world differently than I do and actually listen. Not from a place of making them right or wrong, but from a place of curiosity. In my own journey, the only way I've healed any of my unconscious beliefs and biases is I've created a safe space for them to come up to the conscious awareness so I could recognize how they are serving me or how they are not serving me. And if that's true individually, and if it's true we're all one, then that must be true collectively. And the mind has been so conditioned to believe in good, bad, right, wrong, that this might even be a challenging concept for you in this moment. But the profound simplicity of it is the only way we return to our natural state, which is oneness, which is joy, which is connection, is we create a safe space for what's in the shadow to emerge so that we can lovingly transform it. That's what we're called to do. That's who we have come here to be as spiritual, I was going to say spiritual seekers, but it's not really a seeking, it's a knowing, spiritual knowing that in the midst of all this seeming division, there is oneness. And when I push against it, it gets stronger. What am I standing for? I stand for love. I stand for compassion. I stand for open-heartedness. That is the act of true courage. It's not courageous for me to post my opinion and point fingers. That's not courageous. That's the reactive impulse based in ego reality. Nothing wrong with that. I have plenty of that every single moment. The fundamental question is, what does it create when? What does it create when I have a reactive impulse? What does it create when I allow myself to feel what is present, whether that's sadness or anger or joy or elation or compassion, and allow that feeling to emerge and come through me so that I can return to my natural state, which is joy, being that love, being that joy in the world. This is how consciousness is transformed. As a matter of fact, this is how consciousness was just transformed, because we had a moment together where we tapped into a greater reality. We had a spontaneous insight of something greater than division or fear. We have asked, what is the request for love here? And then we have allowed ourselves to be that love that the world is so yearning for at this moment.